Number 1 is bands and musicians come and go. Man, I've played with so many people throughout my 20s. Especially in my early 20s, I would often think, this band I'm in now, this is the one for life. And you know, that might be the case for some people, but I guess over time I started to realise that it is just quite natural that people come and go. We all have different lives, and especially throughout your 20s, things can change quite rapidly. Number 2, it's okay to take breaks. I think especially in my early 20s, I'd think that I needed to play all the time. I've got to put in those hours to get good. I think over time I started to realise that I could burn out pretty heavily from this, but I would always kind of make myself feel guilty over not practicing. It wasn't really until my mid to late 20s that I actually took longer breaks. And you know, there's been times throughout that decade that I didn't play drums for maybe a month, maybe even 2 months. Yes, it wouldn't happen loads, but whenever I took a break like that, I'd always come back and feel really positive and really strong. But number 3, push outside your comfort zone. There's been a number of times where I've been asked to do something and I've kind of felt a bit scared about wanting to do it and it didn't feel right. One thing I will say about that is the reward of pushing out your comfort zone is always the most positive. I can remember the first time I put a video up on YouTube, I was so scared. And do you know what? It was really worth it, because here we are now. For number 4, we need a creative way to kind of manage our money and also make money as well. I think it's fair to say one of the hardest things about being a musician is the finances are very variable. Sometimes you might be all right, other times it can be quite challenging. I guess it really depends on what you're doing with your drumming and what you're doing in general. I think you ultimately have to think quite carefully about why you're pursuing playing this instrument. And to be honest, if money is the number 1 factor, it's probably not the best idea to continue with it. For number 5, we have our relationship with other musicians over the skills of being a drummer. I remember in my early 20s, I'd really just think, providing I had the chops to play drums, I could basically get away with whatever I wanted to. But then the more I started playing with bands and you'd play night after night and you'd just get so drained, especially being around certain people would be a real challenge. And at the same time, you want to be a nice person to other people as well. Other people won't want to play with you if you're just not very nice. Building those relationships has to come first. If you can play drums as well, well, that's ace. But I know for a fact that I would much rather work with someone who was just a nice person over someone who was amazing but pretty grim. Number 6, not every opportunity works out. Man, this has hit me so hard in the past. I remember a time where a dream job was lined up for me and I genuinely believed that this was going to go ahead. Sadly, it just didn't happen, and it really hit me hard. I was in my early 20s at the time and I really struggled with that. The horizon changes a lot as a musician, and I guess over time you get used to this more and more. It doesn't mean every opportunity falls through, but you just have to be mindful that sometimes people will talk about stuff a lot before it actually takes place. And I know I've been guilty of doing that as well. I guess on the flip side, you also remember that when one opportunity doesn't come, obviously another door opens up. For number 7, we have taken fitness fairly seriously. This has really helped me for 2 reasons. Firstly, playing drums is pretty physical, and I think it's good to be able to breathe whilst performing quite heavily. That's pretty important. But secondly, taking those opportunities to do things fitness related always makes me feel a lot better mentally. I really enjoy going for runs, I enjoy going for a climb. Yeah, I'm not the best at those things, and I'm not trying to be the best at those things, but man, it really helps me and it just makes me feel so much better, especially when I come back to sit behind the kit. For number 8, we have nutrition. This follows the exact same reasons as the previous one. I feel better if I'm eating well, and I know I play better if I'm eating well also. It's a really easy thing to say, but to actually put into place takes a lot of time and takes a lot of effort. But I always know that if I'm on top of both of those things, my drumming always comes out well also. Number 9, recording yourself. I put this off for quite a while, but I started getting more into it in my mid-20s, and I realised a lot of mistakes I was making purely just from watching myself back. And not just watching myself back, but hearing what I was playing also. I'd think I'd be really solid to a metronome, and then I'd listen to myself back, and I'd say, man, who's changed the click? Who's changed the metronome? What's gone on here? Well, it's just me, I just need to sort myself out. But do you know what? Hearing those things secondhand is really important. Number 10, we have understanding the roles of the drum kit in each setting. I really have to think carefully with who I'm playing with and what that should sound like. I remember in my early 20s, I'd want to just smash out drums basically at any given opportunity. But actually you realise that different dynamics are important in different settings. You realise that different musicians want to hear different things. I could throw chops every single second of my playing, and don't get me wrong, there is a time and place for doing that. But realistically, that time and place is quite slim in comparison to the majority of stuff we'd probably play. For number 11, we have being prepared before you say yes. It's so easy to say yes to everything because after all, we're being given an opportunity. I'm getting asked to play drums. Hell yeah, I want to do it. At the same time, it's finding the balance though, because if you shy away from everything, well, that opportunity might not come back up again. I think it's important to think carefully about what your ability is and what you're having to input, how much time that might take you, what it's going to look like, what reward you'd get from it also. I always like to give myself a day or two before I give a full response. Number 12, we have learning to record drums. Now, I'm not saying this is compulsory, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't really learn to do this until my late 20s. But I must admit, even though it's only been the past couple of years, the rewards I've got from that have been amazing. I'm not an expert at recording drums, please don't get me wrong, but being able to do it, I think is a pretty important skill, especially in the modern day. Part of me wished I learned to do it even earlier, because I feel like I could have developed so much more from it by now. For number 13, we have finding inspiration outside of just drums and other drummers. I started to find throughout my 20s that actually I take inspiration from all sorts of things, but why not take that inspiration and input it into music? I know for me, I really love reading, so I'll read different books and I will get different ideas and artistic insights and think I could apply that in a way to my drums. I also really enjoy collecting art. I have different pieces of art around the studio, and whenever I see them when I come in, it always makes me feel inspired to play that little bit more. For number 14, we have the metronome becoming our friend. As I was playing throughout my 20s, the metronome went from something that was just there for me to practice to actually something that almost became a safety net. Pretty much every time I play drums now, if I'm just practicing or playing live, I'll use a click. I know for a fact whenever I play live, we always have a tendency to want to play faster. The click is always going to be there, and that's one less thing you have to worry about. For number 15, we have taking care of gear. Look, we all know drums are expensive, and we also know that if you're playing night after night, this stuff is going to get beat up. We are hitting it after all. I could go into full details of how I care for every single component of the kit, but if there's going to be one that I'm going to share in this video, it is the hi-hat rod. When I learned how to store this correctly, I have always maintained decent hi-hat rods. That's a game changer. Man, they get bent so easily otherwise. For number 16, we have leaning into your weaknesses. There are loads of things that I really struggle with when I play drums, and I know throughout my early 20s, I did not want to address those things. I just really wanted to vibe off the things that I enjoyed and I knew I could show off with. I always try to make effort when I sit down to play drums to look at something that I struggle with, even if it's only just for a few minutes. But I think by just being cool with the fact that that's there and that's something you're getting better with, it's really changed my outlook on playing, and I know for a fact it's made me a hell of a better player. Number 17, we have being able to read and also play by ear. This can be a bit of a controversial topic, but I'll be honest with you, there have been loads of gigs that I just simply could not have done if I couldn't read music to a high standard. But then at the same time as well, learning to play music by ear is a real art in itself. Having that feel and understanding how different musicians play, working with different musicians who are also improvising, it's an absolute game changer. I think being able to do both is really important though, and yes, I am a fan of reading music, but no, I don't use it all the time. Number 18, we have playing with people of all abilities. When I was younger, I'd often think, well, if I was playing with people who were better than me, then obviously I'm probably going to improve. But actually, as I got a bit older, you start to realise that there are times where you might be the most advanced player in the group you're playing with. But that's not a reason to not play with those people. It changes the role of what you're doing as a musician in that setting. And being able to lead a group is really important, and it teaches you a lot about not only your playing, but also about yourself as well as a person. For number 19, we have never forget why you started. Man, when I think back to it and I think of all the different things I've done from playing drums for like 25 years, I have to often remember, why did I start playing? Well, I might have only been little, but let's be honest, I started doing it simply because I wanted to and because I enjoyed it. And I have to remember that sometimes, because it does get hard at times. Of course it gets hard, and it can really take its toll at times, but the majority of time I simply just love it. And for our final one, number 20, never stop learning. Man, I've been playing drums for 25 years, and you know what? I want to play drums for another 25 years. And I don't really mind what that involves. But as long as I keep going, and as long as I keep learning the instrument and learning more about myself, well, hopefully I'm going to continue loving it. And to be honest, that would be the absolute number one tip I would give for everyone. So on that note, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me today. Look after yourselves, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you, and peace.